Okay, I think we can go ahead. So welcome everyone to the Global PrEP Learning Network. Um, we're very excited today to be talking about the next generation of HIV prevention with the Dapivirine Vaginal Ring. Next slide, please. We have a number of great speakers today. We're going to go through an overview of the Dapivirine Ring. We're going to talk about a framework for ring introduction at the national level. And then we're going to hear from our colleagues from the Ministries of Health in Zimbabwe and Kenya to talk about some of their reflections on how ring introduction might happen in the context of oral PrEP scale up in their countries. Next slide, please. So our speakers today are Zita Rosenberg from the International Partnership for Microbicides, which is the product developer for the Dapivirine Vaginal Ring. And Zita has been dedicated to developing products that women can use to prevent HIV and protect sexual and reproductive health for many years and decades. She is a microbiologist and epidemiologist. She previously served in leadership roles with the HPTN and the NIH. And has been on the forefront of research on biological and behavioral factors for reducing HIV transmission for over 30 years. We also welcome Nirja Bavaraju from Afton Bloom. Nirja is a strategy consultant and founding partner of this company, but she has also been working on HIV prevention product introduction for the past 6 years as part of a number of USAID funded projects. Next slide. We're very happy to have Taurai Batasara from the Zimbabwe Ministry of Health and Childcare. Tau is the National Dreams and Key Populations Coordinator at the MOHCC. He works with adolescent girls and young women and key populations to prevent HIV using many different approaches, including PrEP. And he believes we can prevent new HIV infections if we empower communities to take charge of their sexuality by introducing tailor-made inventions. I love that. And we're also very pleased to have Mary Mugambi from Kenya NASCOP. Mary is a public health and mental health specialist and serves as the HIV testing and PrEP program manager at the Division of AIDS and STI Control in the Ministry of Health in Kenya. She has more than 20 years experience working in the Kenyan healthcare system and has been involved in the design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of HIV programs in Kenya. So we're really delighted to have these 4 speakers today. In addition, I'll let you know that in our panel, we have many other experts on ring from IPM, from AVAC, from some of the different countries, Kenya and Zimbabwe, and others who are here to help answer questions as we go through this discussion. Next slide, please. I just want to remind you all that unfortunately, the way the webinar is designed, we can't have everyone talk, so the attendees are muted. However, we welcome a robust chat and would welcome your comments and questions in the chat function. You'll see in the little chat box down there, if you click on the arrow, it will show you a way to select all panelists and attendees. We ask that you please select all panelists and attendees because that allows everyone to see your chat and the answers. If you only send it to all panelists, then not everyone else on the webinar can see your questions and comments. So without further ado, we will continue. Next slide. And pass this over. I'm going to pass this over to Zita Rosenberg to give us an overview of the Dapivirine Vaginal Ring. Zita.
Hi, everybody. Greetings on this, what day is this today? Thursday. All these days seem to blend into one under COVID, but hope everyone is doing well and staying safe. I am very pleased to be able to present to you today on the Dapivirine Ring, let you know what we have done so far and where we hope to head in the near future. Hope everyone can hear me fine, and please, if there's any background noise on my end, please let me know. Next slide, please. So why did IPM develop the Dapivirine ring? The reason now is as relevant as it was way back when, nearly 20 years ago, when we first thought about longer acting methods. Back then, as well as now, available methods really have not done enough to slow the epidemic among women. We certainly have more methods now, certainly oral PrEP and treatment as prevention, but we need more. And we certainly need discrete products that women can use on their own terms, given the complexities, especially of women's lives around the world. We know that no one intervention will solve the HIV epidemic. We need a whole array of possible solutions. And these possible solutions need to make sense for women's lives and at different points in their lives. So we need products that can be used on demand, such as condoms, daily, such as oral PrEP, monthly, such as the Dapivirine ring, or longer, hopefully the injectable and 3-monthly ring. And we also need systemic as well as non-systemic approaches, very similar to the choices that are available to women for contraception. And we know that the more choices women have, especially in contraception, the more likely they are to choose a contraceptive method. So the same thing for HIV prevention. The more options women have, the more likely they are to choose one that they can use well in the course of their lives. Next slide, please. So the Dapivirine ring is made out of a flexible silicone rubber. It was developed by IPM back in the early 2000s. It is a product that women can put in and remove themselves, so there's no need for insertion by a healthcare provider or monthly visits to a healthcare provider. It can be very discreet. Because the woman is wearing it, she's not carrying it around with her, it doesn't make any noise, etc. And it doesn't interfere with sex. So these are all important characteristics of the ring. The ring contains a highly potent antiretroviral drug called dapivirine. It is a non-nucleoside reverse transcriptase inhibitor. The drug was developed by Janssen Sciences Ireland, and we received first worldwide rights to developing country use, and then subsequently worldwide rights exclusively through the company. And we'll talk a little bit more about the phase 3 trials and the open label studies in the next few slides, but suffice it to say that in 2 phase 3 trials, the ring was shown to reduce the risk of HIV infection modestly, and we'll talk a little bit about why that is likely the case. And then in open label extension studies, we saw a greater risk reduction by modeling and increased adherence. And so with those studies, and of course with the EMA positive scientific opinion, we can proudly and happily say with all of our partners that we have all developed the first long-acting HIV prevention product. Next slide, please. So this is a very busy slide, but it talks about the Dapivirine ring trials. There were 2 phase 3 trials, and there were 2 open label studies. And I have a spray bottle near me because I have a number of dogs in my house that are all ready to bark. So I am spraying them to keep them quiet, very nicely spraying them. Anyway, so these 4 studies were conducted by both IPM and the Microbicide Trials Network of the NIH. And the studies were conducted in 4 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, Malawi, South Africa, Uganda, and Zimbabwe. And in the phase 3 program, we saw, as mentioned in the previous slide, a 35% risk reduction in the ring study and a 27% risk reduction in Aspire. And adherence was about 80% in these phase 3 trials, and this was determined by measuring the level of drug left in the ring. So we know how much drug is likely released in the ring during a 1-month period if used consistently. And so we were able to collect all the used rings and find out that about 80% of women in the study used the ring all or some of the time. And about 20% of the women in the study used it, didn't use it at all, or highly inconsistently. And now if you move over to the open label studies, where this was after the risk reduction was confirmed in these 2 trials, the phase 3, we then dropped the placebo arm and allowed any woman who remained HIV negative from the phase 3s to enroll in the open label study. So single arm, open label, meaning everyone got the active Dapivirine ring. And in this study, by collecting these used rings, we saw higher adherence, about 90% or higher, of women who either used the ring all the time or a lot of the time. And these women likely decided to use the ring more because now not only was there some risk reduction that was confirmed, but also importantly for women who enroll in these studies, safety. Because safety is really crucial, especially for reproductive age women. They really want to know that these products are safe before exposing themselves and potential children. So because it's a single arm study, we did not have a comparator arm and the placebo. So we had to model what we felt would have been the HIV incidence in these open label studies. And when we did that, modeling data suggested a 63% risk reduction for the follow-on study to the ring study, and nearly a 40% risk reduction for the follow-on study to Aspire. So the phase 3 trials showed that HIV risk was reduced. The open-label studies suggested that the risk reduction is likely higher when women know it's the product's safety and efficacy. And the strong safety profile for Dapivirine ring was confirmed in the open-label studies. And so we were very excited that all of these studies combined to help us with the positive opinion for the EMA. Next trial, please. Next trial. Next slide. Thank you. So the ring clearly can help fill a gap in the current portfolio. And the current options, both are at the frequency is either at the time of sex or daily. The Dapivirine ring is monthly. The site of action of the Dapivirine ring is non-systemic, which is a nice option to have in addition to the systemic options listed here. And crucially, the Dapivirine ring, as well as oral PrEP, are women initiated and do not need consent or control by the male partner. So we feel that this is an important gap that has been filled potentially with the Dapivirine ring. And I say potentially because we need clearly to roll it out before we can say that any gap has been filled. Next slide, please. And next slide. I'm now going to move on to where we are with the regulatory approvals, which is clearly the most crucial part of access for Dapivirine ring at the moment. So as many of you know, hopefully, because we tried very hard to let the world know, that the EMA did adopt a positive scientific opinion for the ring. And that was received in July of 2020. And it was reviewed under a procedure of the EMA called Article 58. Which was developed in cooperation with WHO to help facilitate access to essential medicines. And the same rigorous standards are applied in Article 58 as they would if the intention was for IPM to market the product in Europe. So our intention clearly is to market the product for developing countries. That is our mission as a nonprofit organization. And the same standards were applied to the review of that product as if we had intended to market it in Europe. The positive scientific opinion is recognized by national regulators in Africa, and it helps facilitate WHO pre-qualification and the development of guidelines. And because EMA has evaluated the quality of the product and WHO has been a part of the review of the product, therefore WHO knows its quality, and therefore that helps with the pre-qualification because those inspections and evaluations are already completed. So the positive opinion is clearly a key step on the path to making the ring available where it's most needed, but it is not sufficient. Clearly, we need African national regulatory agencies to make their own decisions about the ring. Next slide, please. So what happens next? As I mentioned, we're at the World Health Organization step right now. They are actively working on the amendment of HIV guidelines to include the ring, hopefully, should the guidelines committee agree. And they will file for an expression of interest for the product to be on the essential medicines list. And that, the guidelines and the EOI, expression of interest, will together allow for us to apply for abbreviated WHO pre-qualification given the EMA's review and WHO's involvement in that review. IPM will also, in parallel, and has already requested the WHO to follow a collaborative research process, which allows for WHO to and us to allow national medical research regulatory agencies to see the EMA dossier and to use it in their evaluation. And so our goal is to submit the dossiers via that collaborative review procedure by the end of this year to the highest priority countries that were involved in the phase 3 trials and the open label extension studies, as well as those countries with the highest HIV incidence. And so all of that submission will occur by the end of this year and into next year, and even the following year, and then hopefully the regulatory approvals from the African countries will be coming forthwith. So our goal, if everything goes as planned, will be to hopefully receive some African approvals by early second quarter of 2021. And then they will be staggered moving forward, depending on the timelines of the countries, and of course, the impact of COVID on everyone's capacity to be able to do this in a timely fashion. And we also, in parallel, will be submitting to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration by the end of this year as well. Next slide, please. And next slide. So, critical and necessary step clearly is receiving approvals from each country where we would like the ring to be available to women at high risk of HIV infection. And then clearly all of the different buckets that are involved in access to the product. And there will be a lot of more expert people talking about this than I. But clearly there is work done on educational materials with healthcare providers, as we know, who are critical gatekeepers in many cases to access for products, especially to young women. There will be just the operations and logistics of getting the ring in supply chains to the clinics and hospitals. We are very fortunate that the ring is highly stable, room temperature, will have a 5-year shelf life by the time it is rolled out. All of these make the logistics much, much simpler. And that was done intentionally, I might add, on the part of IPM to find a product that would meet those requirements. And then, of course, we clearly need government and donor support, because without money and without someone purchasing the ring and getting it out there, access could be severely limited. So we need government and donor support. Again, in the era of COVID is a challenge. And end user access, creating demand, driving women's awareness, educational materials, all of the factors that are so important in rolling out a product. Next slide, please. There's a fair amount of work that is ongoing and will be initiated on the ring over the next several years. First, let me start on the bottom 3 studies, all being led by the Microbicide Trials Network in partnership with IPM. One is a study of the safety and use of Dapivirine ring and oral PrEP among adolescent girls and young women. And this is looking, again, as we said, at safety and preferences for women. They are using, in a randomized fashion, either the ring for 6 months and oral PrEP for 6 months, and then they get to choose what it is they would like to use. And so understanding choice amongst young women in 3 different countries is very important. And there are critical studies being conducted by MTN about the safety and acceptability of the ring in both pregnant women and breastfeeding women, because clearly these women are at very high risk of HIV infection, and we want to understand the safety of this product so that women can make informed choices. And then a study that we will be conducting that is being required by the European Medicines Agency as a post-authorization efficacy study following the positive opinion is to, again, get additional information in 2 age groups of women, 18 to 21 and those greater than 21 to 25. In the open label extension study, clearly the women had aged from the phase 3 studies, because those studies were done post phase 3. And so in phase 3, there were limited numbers of women ages 18 to 21 in both the phase 3 trials, but clearly they had aged and they were now over 21 in general for the open label extension. So the EMA would like additional data on those women who are 18 to 21 on safety and potential ARV resistance, which is always an issue for any potentially an issue for any ARV-based prevention product. And they would like to be able to see if this study can confirm the risk reduction in the youngest women. And so this study is being designed as we speak. It will critically be evaluated by the EMA in a scientific advice procedure and will be reviewed by key opinion leaders and community groups to make sure that the design of this study meets with everyone's needs. Next slide, please. We know one important concern for African ministries of health is to know what the potential public health impact could be of products. There has been a fair amount of modeling work that has been done on not just on the ring, but on all kinds of HIV prevention options. And clearly a range of options are going to be needed, not just one in any context to achieve epidemic control. and that methods with even modest efficacy. So even if the efficacy remained at 40 to 50% and didn't even go higher than that with better adherence, even those with modest efficacy could have a meaningful impact as part of a comprehensive strategy. And the ring, when used, could prevent infections among women that would otherwise not be averted by any other method, especially if they chose not to use oral PrEP. So we believe that new women-centered approaches such as the ring are crucial to achieving public health control. Next slide, please. IPM is also working in conjunction collaboration with the MTN and with the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development on follow-on rings. The Dapivirine ring that was just given the positive opinion is a 1-month ring. We have a 3-monthly ring in development, and we should see results of the phase 1 study by early 2021. There's a 3-month Dapivirine levonorgestrel ring for contraception and HIV prevention that has had several phase 1 trials and is in a reformulation stage at the moment, but should be in a second phase 1 trial early 2021, or third actually. So we are very excited about both of these follow-on products. Next slide, please. So this is where I am ending. Clearly, IPM's mission is to provide options for women to protect their health and to help women thrive. So we are very excited that the ring could be one of these potential options. And next slide. Clearly a thank you to all of our current donors who are on this slide and past donors who are many, many more, because everyone together helped support all of the work necessary over the last several decades, and especially to our research partners, collaborators, activists, community groups, and the women who participated in all of these trials. They are certainly last but not least. So thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Zita. And we do have some questions, some of which have been answered in the chat, but I think it's good to answer them out loud. So just wanted to do a refresh, some questions around how long does the ring work? So around it being a monthly ring, whether it can be worn or should be worn during menses, whether it can be removed and reinserted, and you know, how long does it take to begin providing protection?
Okay. The release of Dapivirine occurs very, very quickly. The label and our best estimate to be on the conservative side is to assume that it is releasing sufficient Dapivirine for risk reduction within 24 hours. So that is the conservative approach. The ring, as tested, should remain in the body for the entire month. It does not need to be removed for menses, and it should remain in the body for the entire time. And, you know, women may feel that if they're not having sex, they can remove it. There's always the risk that it is not put back in. The reason a monthly product could be highly acceptable and help with adherence is if it's not removed. So keeping it in the entire time is the intended use of the ring.
There's also, thank you. There's also a question here around what is the age? Is there an age limit?
The age for the label from the positive scientific opinion of the EMA is 18 and older, because that was the population that were enrolled in the clinical studies. And every African regulator will make their own decision on the age that it can start. With data from the REACH study, which will have safety information on women 15 and older, that may be information, it will certainly be information that will be submitted to African regulators when the study is completed, and so that may inform or expand their age range. But right now, it will be left up to the African countries to make their decision, but the EMA's opinion is 18 and older.
Thank you. And then there's a question about whether a client can insert it on their own or must it be inserted by a clinician?
The woman inserts it herself.
And just to add to that, we did, I mean, in the clinical trials, I think we did see that some women preferred to have some help from a provider on the first insertion, but very quickly became comfortable inserting and removing the ring.
Right. In fact, about 85% of women could insert the ring on their own first try in the clinic, no problem. Another 10%, it took 2 tries, and the remaining 5%, 3 tries. No woman left the clinic without being able to do it herself. Help means coaching. It doesn't mean that that anyone actually inserted it. So it's, it's like any product that sometimes people, have problems with tampons on the first try if they've never used them before. Certainly in the old days, diaphragms were incredibly difficult to get in easily. But with experience and practice, it is very easy.
And the question, how deep should the ring be inserted? Close to the cervix?
Well, the ring doesn't need to be anywhere other than where it is comfortable. And the where it is comfortable is where it opens up high up in the vagina. And so when it is put in, a woman just uses her finger to push it gently wherever it goes to be comfortable. And everyone knows exactly where that point is because you don't feel it.
Correct. Great. Well, I think there was just a few other questions around, clarifying that the ring does not protect against STIs. So maybe you could comment something about the use of condoms and in conjunction with ring.
Yes, the label, just like with oral prep and with every other intervention other than the male condom or female condom, the product is recommended for use with a male condom because, again, or female condom, because Dapivirine, just like Truvada and Descovy, does not protect against other sexually transmitted infections. And importantly, Dapivirine doesn't have any activity against herpes. It's important that for the prevention of other STIs, that where a male condom can be used, it should be used.
And here's a question about whether the ring can be felt by the male partner during sex.
It is quite male dependent. Most of the men, especially in the experience of the clinical studies, didn't know the ring was there unless they were told it was there. And when they were told it was there, they felt that some men felt that they could feel it. In studies of NuvaRing and other contraceptive rings and post-hormonal replacement rings, again, it is some of the aggregate acceptability data shows that about half of the sexual partners felt it. Now, whether or not they knew about it beforehand may be a factor, but some men can feel it.
And there's a question of whether the ring can come out during sex.
The ring, if placed correctly, and again, women would know if it was correct, should not come out. The Dapivirine ring is made with what's called a tensile strength. It purposefully it expands, right? So you can squeeze it to get it in, and then it opens up. And when it opens up in a round fashion, which is much more difficult to come out. There have been reports of expulsions unintentionally, very few, especially during sex. But again, if it is inserted correctly, the chances of expulsion of this 25 milligram silicone Dapivirine ring made with the kind of silicone that it has, with that kind of tensile strength, expulsion should be minimal.
There's so many good questions here. I'm just going to ask one more so we can go on to our other speakers. But in terms of strategy, how will you communicate an increased need for the ring given there are other prevention options like condoms? Other than discretion, are there other ways that the ring becomes a more preferred method?
Well, the label currently states that the ring should be used when oral prep cannot or isn't used. And so if women choose not to use oral prep, or they can't use oral prep for some medical reason, both oral prep and the vaginal ring are intended to be used with other prevention options, which is how the phase 3 trials were conducted. Women were counseled and provided with condoms, counseled to use condoms and provided with condoms. So the label states that where women can use male condoms, they should continue to use male condoms or female condoms, and they can also use the ring, or they can also use oral prep. You don't want women in any event to substitute oral prep or Dapivirine ring for condoms. So everything is additional, with the exception of the Dapivirine ring was not tested along with oral prep. So oral prep and the ring should not be used together, one or the other. And condoms should be used wherever they can be. And so in some ways, this will be a hierarchy of counseling, just the way in contraception, women are counseled to use the most highly active contraceptive methods, the most effective. Women may choose not to. They may not want to get an injection. They may not want to use daily pills. So other options are what women should use, because you need to use something you can use consistently and correctly.
Thank you. And I know I said I'd move on, but I think this is a really important question. Do you feel 35% of protection is enough to be recommended?
Yes. And it's not me who feels that way. It's the European Medicines Agency, which I believe is their opinion is much more rigorous than mine. And so their positive scientific opinion is based on the 35% that was seen in the phase 3 trials. Now remember, in the phase 3 trials, 20% of those women likely didn't use the ring at all. So that means that those women, those 20% of women who were in the active group, weren't using the ring. And so the 35% is going to be an underestimate of the true efficacy of the ring. Now, if the remaining 80%, and we believe that about 25% of the women use the ring a lot, as measured by how much drug was left in the ring. And then the remaining women in the middle used it sometimes. And we don't know whether or not they were using it when they were exposed to the virus. And so the results of the phase 3 trials are an underestimate of the true efficacy of the ring. In many cases, regulators always worry, outside of the HIV field, that when a product is out on the market, people use it even less than they do in clinical trials. In HIV, it seems to be the exact opposite, as we've seen with oral PrEP and the open label extensions. What you see in the phase 3 is the most conservative risk reduction. So the 35% by itself is sufficient, and it is likely to be much higher.
Thank you for that. And I think that one of the key messages that when we talk about ring is that different products work for different people. And for those women who can't or don't want to use oral prep and can't negotiate condom use, something, the ring may be an option, and 35% is better than 0% of using nothing.
Exactly.
I just have to clarify one other question. It is so important. This is a new product. All of these questions about the product are great, and we will try to answer them in the chat. I just want to clarify there was a question of whether it could be used during pregnancy, and right now ring is not recommended during pregnancy because we are still waiting for study data to confirm the safety profile. Is that correct, Vita?
It's not. It is up to the healthcare provider to determine whether an HIV risk for a pregnant woman, well, it will be once it's on the market. It will be the regulators, likely in country, it will be a healthcare provider's decision whether or not to recommend the ring during pregnancy and breastfeeding if a woman is at very high risk and isn't taking oral prep or able to use male or female condoms. It's not that it is actively advised against, because there is no preclinical data or to date any clinical data that suggests it is harmful in pregnancy or breastfeeding. There is just insufficient data to recommend it, but it is not, how do I say this? It is not
It's not contraindicated.
It's not contraindicated. Thank you.
That's great. Please keep these questions coming because we will not only answer them in the chat, but in the resource sheet that we supply afterwards. And this is, part of why we are having this call today, is to really hear, particularly from country implementers, what are the questions around ring so that we can address these as we think about its introduction. Zita, thank you so much. And we'll have some more time for Q&A at the end. We're going to move on now to think about what are some of the implementation challenges for ring. How would ring fit into the existing HIV prevention portfolios at a national level? And we're going to start with an overview presentation from Nirja, talking about some feedback that she received from multiple countries in some previous work on this topic. Go ahead, Nirja.
Great. Thanks, Christine, and good morning or afternoon or evening, everyone. Next slide, please. As Christine mentioned, I will go through a framework that we developed as part of the Options Project to really look at how the ring could be introduced in country alongside oral PrEP. So for some of you who have joined these webinars before, this framework may seem familiar. It is a framework that we developed as part of the Options Project for the introduction of oral PrEP. And the goal was really to have a simple, easy to grasp list of key action items that need to happen to introduce a new product. And the 5 major categories that we looked at were developing kind of policies, plans, and budgets, developing supply chain, looking at how the ring is actually delivered through different platforms, looking at what is needed to have end users actually take up the ring and use it effectively, and then finally monitoring. So we originally developed this framework based on experiences with oral PrEP in the 3 options focused countries, Kenya, South Africa, and Zimbabwe. And then last year, we went back to the same countries and engaged with a number of different stakeholders, including some of our speakers who will be speaking later in this webinar, to talk about how the ring would be similar or different to oral PrEP, and where the ring could really layer on top of oral PrEP instead of seeming like a brand new introduction effort that would be kind of in addition to the work on oral PrEP. So if we could go to the next slide, you'll see here kind of for each of these 5 major categories, we had a number of specific items that we know based on the work around oral prep need to happen. So I'm not going to go through these in detail right now, but just to point out a few things, you can see in the kind of planning section that there's the convening of a technical working group, integration of the new product in an HIV prevention plan or other relevant plans, engaging community stakeholders, and all the way through to kind of updating supply chain guidelines and logistics, thinking about training and engagement of healthcare workers and establishing referral systems, and ensuring linkages to HIV testing and thinking about refills. And then as we get towards the right-hand side here, you'll see developing and implementing demand creation strategies, considering how social norms or stigma could impede ring use, or how we can build up community and partner acceptance of ring use, support for adherence and continuation, and then continued monitoring and evaluation, pharmacovigilance, and implementation science. So this is kind of a high level look at all of the different things that need to happen. And as you can see, while we originally built this for oral prep, we have adapted it a bit for the ring. And what I'll talk through today is just some of the places where we actually see differences and similarities. So if we could go to the next slide. We looked at each of these different elements and categorized them in three ways, or in one of three ways. One, what we called integration areas, places where aspects of product introduction where the ring can really easily fit in with what's been done for oral prep. And again, this is really based on input from national policymakers and other stakeholders in Kenya, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. So kind of based on real world experience of this. The second are what we call new opportunities. So aspects where introduction of the ring provides a new opportunity to grow uptake and impact of HIV prevention, but it will require some new work and some new action to consider. And then the final area are aspects of product introduction that will be really new for the ring that really can't build directly on what happened with oral prep. So if we take a look at the next slide, I'll provide an overview of how we assessed all of these and then go through category by category. Could we go to the next slide, please? Oh, there we go. So you'll see here, this is how we categorize all of the elements, and this is quite a lot to go through. So we'll go kind of color by color here. If we go to the next slide, we'll focus on the green areas. So the green areas are areas where we saw the ring could really easily and clearly build on the experience with oral prep. And you'll see if you look at the graphic here that the green areas are mostly in planning and in monitoring. So a lot of the elements at the policy level are things where they were hard to do the first time as different countries were introducing oral prep and trying to figure out where it sat as a new biomedical HIV prevention option. But now that they've gone through that experience, most stakeholders felt that the ring could really easily add on to what had been done before. And you'll see that really primarily in the kind of planning and in the monitoring section. If we go to the next slide, we'll see some of the areas in purple. So the areas in purple are where the ring will require some new effort. And really that's as a result of two major things. One, we know that adding the ring now provides kind of a larger portfolio of biomedical prevention options. So we have oral prep and the ring in addition to condoms and other options. And that will require some new effort. For example, you can see here that actually developing demand creation strategies or thinking about information and tools for clients, now we need to consider how we communicate both about the previous options and about this new option, and really think about, and I think Seda mentioned this, about a portfolio of options that's more similar to family planning, where we have many different options to choose from. The second area that is a bit different, or has the potential to be different for the ring, is that it has the potential to in the future be delivered outside of clinical settings. And in that way, it is a bit different than oral PrEP. And so there are some items here where we might need to think about things differently. So for example, who in many countries, the policies that govern who can deliver oral PrEP suggest that it has to be some sort of accredited healthcare worker. And that's under consideration for the ring. And as countries make their decisions about moving forward with the ring, they might want to think about the ring differently. And that will enable broader access to the ring for more people who perhaps cannot get to a clinic where oral PrEP is available. But it will require some additional work and thinking to actually build out those new systems. And then finally, on the next slide, we have our orange areas, and the orange areas are places where the ring really is different than what we saw with oral PrEP. So you'll see here that the supply chain is all orange, and that's because for many countries, oral PrEP, or the drugs that were in oral PrEP, were already a part of the supply chain. And the ring is different in that respect. It will not already be present in many countries. It is a device instead of a pill. So there are things there that we need to really think newly about the supply chain aspects of the ring. The other parts of the ring that are different build on what we were just talking about in terms of how women will know how to insert the ring and start to feel comfortable with the ring. So we know that will require new training and materials for healthcare workers. And it'll also mean that we need to kind of build up community and partner acceptance of the ring and a woman's acceptance of the ring in a different way because it will be new. So that is something to think about relative to PrEP, which is a pill, which most people are familiar with. And then finally, the last orange element here is disposal of used rings. This is the only element that really came up as brand new for the ring relative to oral PrEP, that we will just need to think about how to communicate to people that the ring can be disposed as a sanitary napkin is disposed, but that is a new consideration for the ring that did not exist for oral PrEP. So that was a quick speed through a number of different elements. I wanted to leave us on the final slide, which is really to say that kind of across the board, as we consulted with different national stakeholders, there was a real sense that this was doable, that it did not feel like kind of one more thing to add to the long list of things that they are already working on, but rather that they could really build from the work that they've done to introduce oral PrEP and now add a new element into the mix. So some things that I'll highlight here, quotes from our stakeholders from South Africa, Kenya, and Zimbabwe, that there's a mood of anticipation. Stakeholders noted that we're moving towards the family planning direction, where we have a menu of options for different audiences, and that we're not starting with a blank slate here. Now that we've done oral PrEP, we can quickly adjust to the ring. And this other final stakeholder saying that given that we have several years of PrEP implementation, we have a better understanding of how to implement and can speed up ring implementation. So hopefully that will be a good segue into our upcoming presenters. So I will pause there and thank you so much. Happy to take questions if there's any about this, or we can certainly spend my question time going back to some of the questions on the ring that I see in the chat.
Thanks, Neerja. We've actually used up most of our question time, so we're gonna move straight on through our remaining presentations, and then we'll see what time we have at the end. Now we get to hear directly from our leaders of Ministry of Health in Zimbabwe and Kenya on what this experience has been like for oral PrEP and what they think it might be like for ring. So turning over to you, Tal, to share your thoughts from Zimbabwe.
All right. Thank you very much, Christine. It's always a pleasure to support, I think, the work that really empower women to make decisions around issues to do with HIV. And Zimbabwe, I think, just is one of those countries that is still experiencing high HIV prevalence amongst women. Can we move on to the next slide? All right, so whilst we are experiencing high HIV prevalence amongst our women, but in particular our adolescent girls and young women, we saw it fit as a country to adopt PrEP as one of the HIV prevention methods of choice, so that we can give people a wider option in terms of finding a suitable choice in terms of HIV prevention. So in 2016, we adopted the HIV and ART guidelines, of which PrEP was indicated as one of the methods that we can use for HIV prevention. And in 2018, we then developed an implementation plan, the PrEP implementation plan, which recognizes that PrEP will be offered in many forms. So we were thinking ahead during that time that at some point probably we'll have the ring, probably an injectable as we move on with time. So our implementation plan left, I think.
Tao, you are breaking up, so I'm going to suggest you turn your video off and see if the sound quality is better. In fact, you're frozen right now.
Sorry, Christine, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Why don't you turn off your video? Let's see if the sound is better.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Oh, okay, that's fine. So I was looking at, I think, in terms of the background, we're acknowledging that adolescent girls and young women still is disproportionately affected by HIV. So since the inception of the PrEP program, there's been a slow uptake of PrEP among adolescent girls and young women. So I will speak to this as I go on with the presentation, say what might be some reasons why we will experience low uptake of the oral PrEP since PrEP was started in Zimbabwe. Next slide. So this slide is just giving us in terms of a roadmap that we adopted when we started to roll out PrEP. And when we adopted the National HIV Prevention and ART guidelines in 2016, we had to engage stakeholders to introduce PrEP, to discuss with the communities how do they accept PrEP if we are to offer it, I think, within different facilities. And in those particular facilities, where exactly at which entry point would they want to see us providing PrEP, which is then becomes a very important factor when we are going to discuss issues around the ring, to say where do we probably need to place the ring as far as issues to do with accessibility is concerned. But we also then constituted a technical working group and we started rolling PrEP, I think, in 6 districts as part of the pilot project. We also conducted a CAP survey, which was looking at knowledge, attitude, and practice of our healthcare providers to see their mind, their perceptions around offering PrEP to adolescent girls and young women. And we had PrEP learning sites, which then informed the national rollout of the PrEP program. So in 2018, we then had our public health facilities, and we also then launched the PrEP implementation plan. But what are some of the challenges that we saw as far as PrEP uptake amongst adolescent girls and young women is concerned? Next slide. And can we move to the next slide if possible? All right, so these are some of the few challenges that we observed as far as low uptake of PrEP amongst adolescent girls and young women is concerned. So there is an issue to do with the disclosure to partners and seeking authority to be on PrEP. So that is regardless of the partner being probably the person who is posing the risk to the young woman or to the adolescent girl. And also the challenges with the package. There was a lot of complaining from adolescent girls and young women that the PrEP bottle is unappealing. It has got this rattling sound that is not comfortable for them to move around with in their handbags or in their pockets. So they need something that would probably be discreet. Hence, I think our discussion today focusing on the ring. There were cases of intimate partner violence when somebody had to find out that they have of pills, I think, in their purse or in their bag that they are keeping in there. But also some of the adolescent girls and young women are still staying with their parents or their caregivers. And they were not comfortable in terms of going home, carrying a bottle of pills, and they weren't sure in terms of where they can keep these pills or where they would store their PrEP in preparation of taking it. Next slide. But of course, let's move on to the next slide. But of course, there are huge opportunities as far as the ring is concerned, because already we have adopted the HIV-ART guidelines, which include PrEP, and we acknowledge that PrEP can be offered in different forms. So already in terms of policy, there is a guiding document that then guides us in terms of who should be initiated on PrEP, what targets do we have as far as PrEP is concerned, and where in the facilities should we be able to find PrEP in our health facilities. And also our PrEP implementation plan that was developed for 2018 to 2020 acknowledges that in the future, there are possibilities that PrEP can be delivered in different forms. So as far as the policy is concerned at policy level, there is a buy-in, there are documents that speaks to the availability of PrEP within our health facilities, but also not necessarily our public health facilities alone, but also facilities that are being supported by different implementing partners in our NGOs that are also operating in the same landscape. Next slide. When we look at issues to do with capacity building, because already we are into the program. So since we have started the program in 2016, we have a total of 282 healthcare providers that have been trained to provide PrEP, which is already a very good opportunity if we are to introduce the ring right now, because already we do have healthcare workers that have been trained. What we probably need to move on to is around issues to do with refresher trainings, where we can then give them new information around the ring. So PrEP is currently available in district hospitals and some private level facilities. And the capacity building of healthcare workers provides an opportunity for reintroduction, for the introduction of the ring within those particular facilities. And there is a huge opportunity to include the ring in the current PrEP training manual. So currently we have ongoing trainings around PrEP, and we have been working around revising our training manual to include the new innovations and new learnings that are coming in. And the ring is coming in at an opportune time for us to be able to include it in our training manuals that we can use to train healthcare providers. We can move on to the next slide. Of course, it was important for us to be able to also look at issues to do with the structural acceptance, because I think when you look at acceptability of some of these HIV prevention methods, it boils down to issues to do with gatekeepers and community members who are sometimes custodians of religion and custodians of culture. So it was important for us also to engage community around issues to do with the PrEP. And also when we did community engagement, we're also considering community leaders and gatekeepers that will also assist in the quick uptake of the ring when it's introduced. So the identification and training of PrEP champions who also work as mobilizers for the clients, present a huge opportunity right now for us to be able to introduce the ring as far as PrEP is concerned. And the ring also provides an opportunity for empowering women to take charge of their sexuality. So this will also then be able to deal with issues to do with different gender dynamics. I mentioned the issue to do with IPV, but the ring, we see it as a game changer as a ministry around the issues to do with IPV, around issues to do with the forced disclosure amongst adolescent girls and young women, because it's their body, it's their choice, and they should be able to make that choice. And the ring provides that discrete opportunity for adolescent girls or for women in general to be able to use the ring without owing anyone an explanation. But while we think ahead of trying to engage male partners as far as PrEP is concerned. Next slide. So a huge opportunity, I think, lies around issues to do with integration. So Zimbabwe is moving towards full program integration in HIV combination prevention. So when PrEP came, it was also introduced as part of HIV combination prevention. And as an opportunity within family planning and PrEP within the health facilities. So what we at some point did as far as research is concerned is that we had to carry out a research looking at the possibilities of providing PrEP in family planning dedicated clinics. So in those clinics, we then found out that women were very happy to go to the family planning clinics at their family planning commodities, but at the same time also accessing the oral PrEP pill. So this also then helped in terms of also reducing the period of women going to and from facilities to access different services. And the country already has got a PrEP technical working group, and the ring could be added to the existing platforms where we can discuss in terms of the direction that we need to take as a country, discuss in terms of opportunities that might also be available as far as rolling out the ring is concerned. Next slide. Of course, I think I've mentioned issues to do with knowledge attitude survey in terms of research. So we did carry out a research, I think, around just to understand what will be the perceptions around communities, perceptions around amongst our healthcare providers. But communities and the health facilities were ready and supported the idea of PrEP, and the introduction of the ring will not be any different from that than for oral PrEP. So we are going to, it's more like we are going to have an expansion of the program that is currently happening, and we don't need necessarily maybe to carry out more researches in terms of either efficacy or acceptability. Zimbabwe also participated, I think, in the clinical trials, which also then gives us an opportunity as a country, because already we've got buy-in, already the results have showed that women were happy to have PrEP and family planning integrated at the same time. And those who participated in the ring were happy that the ring gave them power to make decisions over issues to HIV, over issues to with the sex. Slide. As far as demand generation is concerned, we also needed to mobilize us also to create a demand as far as services is concerned, which we also feel that when the ring comes, it also it's going also to need a lot of demand generation that needs to be created for women to be able to accept it, for women to be able to utilize it. So the country developed a comprehensive communication strategy wherein PrEP is included as one of the HIV prevention intervention. And the strategy used a human-centered design through gender mapping, which provides insights on what women want as far as PrEP is concerned. And currently we are developing IEC material that includes videos, radio programs, and to create demand as far as PrEP is concerned. So the ring is coming at an opportune time where we can also include in the IEC material that is being developed in the programs that are being aired on radio and videos that are going to create demand within the spaces that we are going to be operating in. We also adopted the V campaign, which was also trying to address issues with acceptability and packaging of oral PrEP commodities. Next slide. Right, so this is just, I think, a part of our communication strategy, which is looking at understanding adolescent girls and PrEP, just to get some of the key insights that really adolescent girls want. And I think the issues that stood out were issues to do with the confidentiality and stigma are critical issues, I think, for the adolescent girls and young women. And in terms of what probably they would want to consider, that might be considered as far as the ring is concerned, is issues to do with peer support, privacy and confidentiality, adolescent-friendly health services, enhanced adherence, counseling, adequate knowledge, and the benefits of PrEP. So this is part and parcel of what we're trying to gather as far as provision of PrEP is concerned amongst our adolescent girls and young women. So the comprehensive communication strategy also have got different insights for different populations, groups, giving us insights in terms of what they prefer and what would they want as far as HIV prevention is concerned. Next slide. And of course, the monitoring and evaluation, the Ministry of Health has developed M&D tools that are currently being used for the PrEP program. And we see that as an opportunity that when the ring comes already, we've got M&D systems in place that will also then be able to help us capture the data, tell our story as far as PrEP is concerned, and to be able to use evidence to inform our programming as we move on with the program. Next slide. So what will the ring provide? I think I've mentioned some of these issues. It will address the challenges of packaging that adolescent girls are complaining about. And also, it will also then empower women to take charge of their sexuality as the ring is discreet. But the ring will also add to a wide array of HIV prevention interventions that are currently available. So the ring is not going to replace any of the HIV interventions or HIV prevention methods that we are currently using, but we'll continue to offer it as part of combination prevention so that women can have wider options that are tailor-made to their needs, wider options that they can control themselves at the end of the day. Next slide. Of course, there are challenges. We can move on to the next slide. Because already we have developed M&D systems, there will be need for the program, will require maybe financial resources to revise and print new tools that also then include issues to do with sensitization to our healthcare providers for them to be able to capture that information. As far as capacity building is concerned, resources will probably be needed to be able to do refresher training for already trained cadres to include the ring when it's introduced. And procurement, I think colleagues have spoken about this. That is, these are new devices that will need a different costing altogether, quantification, and also resources to be able to procure them. So just like any other program, financial resources are required to procure the DVR, I think, for use. And in terms of demand generation, there will be need for financial resources to support the development of new IEC material that can also be used as far as demand generation is concerned. And of course, I think COVID-19 pandemic presents challenges as far as reaching out to communities with services is concerned. And while the ring is a good option in terms of HIV prevention, again, if we are to continue with this current context, we will have challenges in terms of reaching out to communities with services. Next slide. All right, so I think in summing up, I think in concluding, the country has got systems and policies in place that can provide opportunities for the introduction of the ring. We are just waiting, I think, for the ring probably to be introduced because we have got the system running. And the communities are ready for the ring as we are looking forward to an intervention that is tailor-made to their needs. I think adolescent girls and young women wouldn't wait for this particular intervention. There's been enough research, program implementation and experience to lead to quick uptake and utilization of the ring. But also, I think current demand generation and community mobilization activities that are ongoing present a huge opportunity, I think, for the ring to be introduced. So once WHO releases the guidelines, we should be able to hit the ground running as far as the ring is concerned. Next slide. So thank you very much, I think, for the opportunity to share. I still believe that this is an opportunity for our women, in particular adolescent girls and our young women who are disproportionately affected by HIV, to have something that they can own, something that can be a game changer as far as HIV is concerned. Because for a very long time, most of our HIV prevention intervention were skewed towards and controlled by the male counterparts. And this one gives an opportunity and empower women in general to take charge of their sexuality. And I think the ring will provide a lot of opportunities for our young women whom we have seen probably not really or keen on taking oral PrEP. Otherwise, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tao. That was very interesting. We're going to move now over to hear from Mary Mugambe from Kenya. Over to you, Mary.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I'll play through our concerns as give you a general ring.
Unfortunately,
Right.
Mary, the sound is garbled.
Me now?
It's somewhat better. Please try again.
Okay, just better.
Unfortunately, it's not great. You know, it's hard sometimes with the internet connection. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like it's just garbling it a bit as you come. Why don't you just speak for a while and let's see if it smooths out.
Okay, just a minute. I've changed my internet. Is that better? Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, much better. Thank you.
Okay, great. My name is Mary Mugambe. I'll be presenting this on behalf of Kenya. So next slide, Kristen. So I'll be going through our PrEP journey, where are we at in terms of pre-exposure prophylaxis in this country. Next slide. We began our journey in about 2016, and where we had our national rollout, release of the test and treat PrEP guidelines. We had the formation of our technical working group, and we also carried out a few demo projects, workshops, and the PrEP TWG subcommittee meetings began, and we had the approval of TDF FTC. And in May 2017, we had the launch of the National PrEP Framework. Next slide. And so looking at the key highlights of PrEP implementation between June 2018 and now, we've had PrEP facility assessments and data analysis and reporting. We have had some issues, of course, with reporting, which we've been able to resolve early this year in 2020. County level data progress review and work planning is what we do to be able to look at how counties are reporting in terms of PrEP. We have had several PrEP M&E tools training. We can't say we've trained everyone, but this being a new intervention, we are still ongoing carrying out training. We've had the private sector PrEP assessment. We have various studies that are looking at dispensing of PrEP within the pharmacy. PrEP QI learning forum, and then the costing meeting we had it convened. All in all, we have our PrEP website and research repository where we have a lot of studies that we are carrying out on PrEP, and we are currently working on combination prevention integration. As we speak this week, we are looking at integrating PrEP within family planning. This is supported by EVAC, and we are having very good discussions in terms of policy and implementation for PrEP within the reproductive health clinics. Next. We are supposed to answer some questions, and the first one is, what does the National Ministry of Health need to know about DVR to decide to include it in Kenya's HIV prevention? For one, it's important to have evidence of the effectiveness of the ring, and that has been presented, and I have looked at it. And this is something that is going to be very important for us, that it works. I've had most of the discussions that we've been having on the chat. Would you rather have somebody who's at 0% prevention or 35% prevention? We get it. I think it's more important to have various products within the market, and women need to make choices for that. And then we also need to find out evidence that the ring has been trialed in countries with a similar epidemiological profile to Kenya, and I'm glad to hear it's been tested in Zimbabwe and Uganda, and those are similar to us, and we would like to see that, and evidence of that is very important. And currently we are working on our ART guidelines, so that needs to go into the guideline, and we are working on putting information on the Dapivirine ring and any other product that is coming in terms of pre-exposure prophylaxis. Then potential impact on HIV prevention, and then of course the cost. And the cost would be the cost of the commodity and also the cost of implementation. How much does that cost, and can we afford it as a country? How much will the cost reduction be in terms of donors being able to lower the cost of these products? Next slide. So what opportunities does the DVR bring to HIV prevention program in Kenya? It increases the number of HIV prevention methods available in Kenya, particularly for the vulnerable population, that is adolescent girls and young women. And we think it is an important product for this age, considering the fact that it is a discrete item that someone uses without the knowledge of another. We have issues, of course, with divergent views in Kenya amongst stakeholders on whether the AGYW should be using this and all that, but we feel that this is a very important product that this age category can use. Those who struggle with oral PrEP, particularly AGYW, may find DVR a more acceptable and beneficial prevention option, so improving adherence and helping the Ministry of Health meet its prevention targets. DVR can also be included in the ongoing initiative to integrate HIV prevention and SRH services at facility level, because at SRH is where the provider is really comfortable selling products, and they have a wide range of menu within that SRH as compared to CCC. Remember, in Kenya, we started primarily offering PrEP within CCC, but we want to move to RH, and we see the DVR being a very good product that we can be able to use among our providers who are working at SRH. Next slide. What will it take to add DVR to Kenya's national HIV combination prevention policy, and what will be the steps of the process of the introduction in Kenya? So once the WHO pre-qualification is completed, we need evidence and effectiveness and cost and impact information in regards to it. The release of the WHO guidelines is an important event. And then approval of DVR in country by the Kenya Pharmaceutical and Poisons Board, who are responsible for registering all the devices. And then, of course, our technical working group, which will spearhead necessary updates to existing policies and guidelines, and development of the new guidelines and implementation plan as required. So this is happening currently for 2020. 2020, we hope to have finished our guidelines by 2021, and we look forward to having this included. Next slide. What challenges are anticipated in Kenya? Some stakeholders may challenge the introductions of DVR on the basis of it being too soon. Remember, we just started PrEP the other day. And since Kenya has not yet realized the full potential for oral PrEP, Some stakeholders may feel it is a bit too much too soon. And then how to sustain the gains of oral PrEP as we introduce DVR. We are always striving to follow up our clients who are on PrEP. We have many clients actually falling out at around 50%. But we feel like it, of course, will be a challenge in terms of monitoring all the clients, but it's something that can be done as long as we identify what age category needs to go on DVR, and these are systems that are put within guidelines, it's possible. Demand creation for a potentially demedicalized product like DVR. Demand creation is something that needs to be there continuously and sustained. And we have always had a problem with demand creation because it comes in for a short while in a year, and the next year it's gone. And we really struggle to be able to sustain that budget for demand creation. So this is important. Low understanding of risk among target populations. This one is key. Some target populations don't just understand what this risk is all about and what they need to do. Resources to train providers could be limited. Currently, we have reduced most of the trainings. We have gone on to online kind of training. And even now, considering the COVID issues, but I see these as something that can be done online. So having the resources to carry out training is a challenge that needs to be met. Revision of existing M&E tools to accommodate DVR or development of new tools. As we look at integration, we are having different tools, and we hope to be able to harmonize the tools between HIV program and reproductive health so that this reporting is made easier. Next slide. What have we learned from experience with the introduction of other products for HIV prevention and reproductive health services that could be applied? So buy-in from government is very critical. So we feel this is something we have learned, and this is something we need to do continuously so that we can be able to have support in terms of policy and even implementation, and being able to involve media so that some of the demand creation is actually done immediately the product comes on board. And then meaningful involvement of target population in design, implementation, and monitoring. That is very key. Sustained demand creation, as I had said earlier. Effective communication with media and communities to avoid assumptions. Propagation of myths and negative publicity. This needs to be started from the beginning, and it needs to go on, because some negative publicity can kill a very good program. Demonstration studies which will be beneficial, particularly to demonstrate acceptability and the possibility, and to highlight key considerations that arise from real-world implementation. This is also important for us so that we can be able to implement in the right way. I think that is it from us here in Kenya in the pre-exposure prophylaxis program. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Back to you, Kristen.
Thank you so much, Mary. It's really great to hear both from Kenya and from Zimbabwe on your thoughts of how RAIN might fit in, and very encouraging to think of the HIV prevention portfolio expanding to include more prevention products. We are close to time here, so I'm going to do a little bit of a wrap up. We have had a very rich chat with a lot of discussion, and we are going to put that all in a resource sheet and share these slides as well as questions and answers, written answers. Probably it'll take us about a week to get that out, and it will be posted on the website, the PrEP Learning Network website. But I do want to say that given that RAIN is a new product and people are less familiar with it, we want to start a new mailing list. So, you know, the PrEP Learning Network has covered, you know, it's supposed to be comprehensive to cover all of PrEP, but I think it would help to have a some RAIN-specific communication. So we're thinking about putting out a quarterly newsletter and, you know, maybe having some follow-up webinars specific to RAIN. So you'll see here a link where you can sign up if you would like to be part of that mailing list. I want to thank all of our speakers today, Zita, Nirja, Tao, and Mary, for your excellent presentations. And then I just want to remind folks to register for our future webinars. On October 22nd, the next Prep Learning Network webinar will focus on the DREAMS programs and how they are accelerating PrEP rollout for adolescent girls and young women. And then on November 19th, we will hear from the Charisma team around relationship dynamics and IPV interventions with PrEP. So look forward to seeing all of you then. Thank you for joining today, and I wish you all a wonderful afternoon and evening. Take care.